Our outline for today is we're going to present the project first and the rationale. So a little bit of a background, the rationale, the problem that we are addressing, and then our project is an answer to that problem. We're going to talk a little bit about what open educational resources are for those who are maybe not, informed or knowledgeable about it, and open educational practices. We're going to go through these 4 pilot studies we did. And then we're going to talk about some future research that we would like to continue doing, and how, and then, your questions and answers.
This project really was designed to look into the issue of the kind of increasing datafication of society and of daily life, and all aspects of our lives being data points that are being kind of collected and analysed and studied, and sometimes used for purposes that we may not necessarily agree with, and that increasingly we are sort of becoming disempowered in this because we don't have a lot of necessarily a lot of control or even a lot of understanding over the datafication that's occurring, and in what ways data is used. And so this project is really all about building capacity for educators in thinking about how to bring this topic into their teaching practice. And we kind of based our method for developing this project in open and critical pedagogies.
And we started doing some work around the use of open data as OER around 2015, where we thought about bringing up the data that was being opened up through transparency laws and open government partnership and stuff like that from governments, and to bring it on into the classrooms in higher education to help academics and students to help developing citizenship skills, and also to kind of work real life scenarios. So that was a bit of a rationale. And it's been growing up as we also grow up in the context of kind of the interactions with data-driven system, and that includes government and government policies. So enhancing critical thinking and data literacies and statistical political literacies through the use of data to create participation, active participation, and collaborative thinking, collaborative citizenship skills. So this is kind of what we've been doing. So that's the first publication in 2015, Mercado. Then we were invited to discuss kind of at global level the impact of open data in the education sector. So we look at from two sides. One is how data is being used to shape and develop education policy, how data affects the urban landscape. Educational data can affect the urban landscape at kind of datafying schools around performance. So it changed the price of land. So that's another perspective. And then how people can, through education, how can people be enabled to actively participate into politics and have a say, for example, in budgeting and into kind of having an evidence-based opinion, understanding data. So that's kind of the perspective on that. And then we moved, when we started working with it, but we have worked with him before, but we have this paper with a colleague who's a philosopher about bringing a critical lens into data literacy for academics. So kind of looking for academic professional development, and then bringing up data, when they bring data into the classroom, which skills they need to have, us and all of you, our colleagues need to have for deploying data and data literacy and data-led kind of activities, and curriculum design for developing skills that are not just technical or how to analyze data, for example, through R, or just like how to use SPSS, but also the critical thinking, the criticality, and the analysis behind it. So yeah, that's basically a bit of what we've done. We keep doing things, by the way.
Yes, and here is yeah, like a little timeline of these things that have been, you know, adding to what we have done with this project. And Leo, if you want to, yeah, and kind of enlarge a little bit our idea of the problem.
Well, so it's I think what it says on the slide is the nub of it. So the idea that data is not actually simply neutral, transparent information. That this was kind of one of the issues for open data promoters was realizing that that they've been saying, well, you know, we need to get all that data open because then people can know. And it's actually not just about having access to data. It's about having skill sets that enable you to actually interrogate it and make some kind of sense of it, and also kind of critically analyze what is the reason that data even exists? What is the data that's actually missing that we don't have? Who made this data and what for? These are really crucial questions for thinking about it.
Yeah, and that in a way, you know, it leads us to think that data is not raw but cooked. And this is an idea of Kitchin, Robert Kitchin, who is a scholar in Ireland, in Dublin, who works frantically in data and in the social life of data. And so the cooking of data does not take place in a vacuum, but within a context. And these data-driven endeavors are socio-technical system. And I think that socio bit of the system is something that results of human values, is the result of human values, desires, and social relations. And these things are key to take into account, as Leo was saying before, what data is there, what data is missing, why is it missing, what are the consequences of it being missed, what are the power relations that shape the data that is being used in order to shape policy, and all of that, if you wish. And so, you know, recognizing the social dimension of data and understanding the systems as socio-technical systems allows us, or gave us, this kind of conceptual position to challenge these unproblematic ideas, like the data revolution, for example, that seems progressive and only enhancing the life of everyone, which, yes, it does. We're not saying that data is bad, but it's more problematic than only being good and only enhancing the life of people. And so, you know, how did we address this political dimension of data? So we first decided to have an open critical pedagogy inspired by critical pedagogues such as Freire, Ira Shore, Bell Hooks, Giroux, you name it. And particularly from Freire, we take this idea that for him, we need to be able not only to read words or the word, but we need to be able to read the world, which will make us active subjects that are capable to change history instead of just being passive objects of history. And of course, if we think about the world in which we are kind of devising a solution or an intervention, which is the world of data and algorithms, being object is really problematic because objects are known and acted upon. So we would be only these data points for whoever wants to take the points of our data, our social interactions as data points, But we should then be subjects that know and are able to act in the datafied society. And it's exactly knowing and acting ethically and critically the aim of our critical approach to data literacy in higher education. And so what we did is, given our backgrounds and our network and what we do, we devised an international collaboration where we created and designed and implemented an OER And it has content, it has resources, it has analytical tools. It is in English and Spanish, but it also has a feature where the content can be translated in any language that is maybe not that mainstream as English and Spanish. And we're gonna go very briefly over what's OER and what's OEP, so Open Educational Resources and Open Educational Practices, so that then the project makes more sense in that context. And I leave Leo here to introduce OER and OEP.
Thanks, Cara. So, OER is quite, I guess, more famous phrase, or Open Educational Resources, as part of the what's often called the Open Education movement. These are defined by UNESCO as teaching, learning, and research materials in any medium, digital or otherwise. In practice, normally digital, but of course you can also have open resources that can be printed and made into books and this kind of thing as well. But the important thing is they reside in the public domain or have been released under an open license. That means that people can access them, use them, adapt them, redistribute them to others at no cost. So the core idea is that these resources are free to anyone who wants them, and they can not only use it. So it's not only like a library that you can borrow them from, but actually you can also adapt them for your own purposes, localize them, for example. So it's really like great idea, and UNESCO have been pushing for this for quite some time, leading to, we'll come to in a moment, 2019 recommendation that all the member states should be developing policy around this. The open educational practices are a wider concept, a bit more nebulous, but really are all about practices that are social, participatory, usually based on using technologies, so that you can enable interaction, knowledge creation, and empowerment of learners. So this is very often working with forms of OER, but sometimes it's not only about, sometimes it's not really so much about OER, so much as about really providing open spaces in which people can share, interact, discuss, collaborate. And so in this project, we wanted to draw on really on all of these ideas as a way of enacting this project to build capacities.
Yeah, and one thing that the open educational practice ethos, if you wish, contemplates and encourages us to do is that it's not open practice is not only the use of educational resources, but as well open technologies that will facilitate the main idea, which is the collaboration, flexible learning, and sharing the teaching practices. And so that also that these tools that are more open and maybe and drive participation also makes the user to be more aware of proprietary software and data and privacy protection. So it's a way of using them and at the same time becoming conscious of these elements that are so important. And the UNESCO recommendation on OER, which is something that came out in 2019, being conscious about the importance of sharing not only resources, but also teaching practices. So they then started to enunciate the standards and the strands that we're going to go into them, where it is recommended to use and create OERs and also to enact open educational practices. So this recommendation supports the creation, use, and adaptation of these inclusive and quality OER. And it really talks about how can we facilitate international cooperation. And, when access to education is a daily struggle, the recommendation on OERs that UNESCO has came about is really a good way in which we can be supported to address these problems of access. They can be different. So it can be the costs of the resources. It can be the difficulty to understand copyright. It can be not having access to things because you are in a not privileged position and you just don't have access to things. And in the pandemic, we saw how it was in, I mean, this just jumping into this online mode of teaching, the community of open educators and educators in general, I have to say, we just came together and started to think, okay, what can we do to share what we know as teaching online, the resources we have created, and here you have links sharing OER, there is an Excel sheet with a lot of resources. Then librarians thinking, how can we, make a fair use of the resources for people to access? And it really helped the entire world, if you wish, to have more access to the practices, but also to the resources. And these 5 areas that UNESCO considers need addressing is the building capacity to access, use, adapt, create, and share these OERs, building a policy, which is key. Then caring that what you develop is inclusive and equitable so that you can really access and use it. And that means a broader spectrum of the population. Sustainability models for OER, and then the facilitating international collaborations. And in that sense, I think for us, we are, of course, building capacity, but one of the things we are doing with this project is we did build an international collaboration. And again, being aware of the time, I guess we're going to talk about 2 of them, although there are 4, and the slides address the 4, but maybe talking about Uruguay in Latin America, and the Kenya one is going to be, I think, it's going to give you a broad perspective of what we did. So Javiera is going to start with the Uruguay course, and then I'm going to go with the Kenyan one. So Javi.
Hi, yeah, so the Uruguay pilot builds up on 3 previous courses that I have led with the University of La República in Uruguay. The University of La República has a Center for Open Education, and one of the members, so Manuel, is also part of Data Uruguay. So the connection, it's there. So in 2016 we got a bit of funding for doing an experimental course on how to use open data as OER. We got involved, part of the government of Uruguay, to that course, and then we did another one in 2018, then we did another one in 2020. So when this opportunity of doing another course, slightly different, of course, because it's not always the same, like more led into criticality, of course, we thought that the Center for Open Education at La República was the right place to do it. They have a very good reputation on the region, so we managed to recruit over 100 participants. The course was divided in 2 sections. So the first was a kind of leveling up course about how to use open data and understanding data. So basic concepts from what is open data to data ethics. It was a self-taught course, and as they got this diploma, they could move on into the intensive course, as we used to call it, or we like to call it, the very intensive course. That was 4 weeks. Lots of webinars and talks from experts in basically every subject of open data or data in general. So we have experts in artificial intelligence, we have experts in data corruption, data governance, platform, privacy, ethics. So you name it, we had it. Most of them, everyone was local to Latin America. So every single workshop was in Spanish, which was very, very important to connect it with the local context. Then in the curriculum design, we make sure that the final work was group work. So basically we created a kit for them to do the work, but also bring the same kit into their classroom. So basically we trained them into doing a data-led activity that had from data exploration, data analysis, solving a problem, find a data set. So everything that we thought it was a core to the course, we created a kit for them to try it, test it, create a narrative around it, solve a problem through data, and then basically they can redo the same activity in class. It was very, very positive. We can move forward. It was a very interdisciplinary course. people from 14 South American countries, so Latin American in this case, so from Mexico to Chile, every country was covered. Experts were basically from everywhere in Latin America, Costa Rica, Paraguay, Uruguay, you name it. We have colleagues also based in Latin American or Hispanic colleagues based in Europe. So we have colleagues from Italy and London joining up. So the content was where we produced the content first in English, and then when it was translated, we contextualized the examples as well. So to make sure that the examples and the case studies we used talk to the audience, we thought it was really, really important. So Caro, you can move forward, please. So yeah, we have speakers, we have friends that came and joined. That was pretty good. Some were in the shape of a webinar, some were in the shape of a discussion, some were in the shape of a workshop. So we have plenty of opportunities to people to gain knowledge from the experts in the region. And yeah, we get really, really, really good feedback. One of the things the university and the center was really proud of, we basically didn't have dropouts. We graduated most of everyone that registered. Everyone was an academic in a university in the region. So very exhausted people ran the extra mile and didn't drop out of the course. That was an achievement for us. Extremely good feedback, one of the best evaluated courses in the last years. So yeah, I think we was absolutely proud of our work over there.
And our Kenya chapter was run with Judith, who is in the picture, who is an open educator, and she is an advocate for open educational resources as well. And that was at the Tangasa University College in Nairobi. It was based on 2 workshops during a month. So the first one was introducing the content and the tools that they could use. Then we left them to use those and, adjust them for their own needs. And then they would reflect back, and we used more a coaching approach, just having a conversation, how it works, questions and answers. And we did to design, as well as in Uruguay. In Kenya, the context is completely different. And so we gathered different expertise and experts in the area so that we could, what I call, decolonize the curriculum, in the sense that the problems and the materials really are speaking to them and their social reality. So highlights, really, I would say, is that it was tailored to what one assumes, of course. We talked with them, but you have also a lot of input with what the literature says at the same time. So we contextualize the videos, the readings, the activities to the context of, we choose farming as the key issue because farming is main way of subsistence for smallholder, farmers and rural communities. We had a booklet for teachers and students. And although in Kenya, there wasn't a culture of data, if you wish, there was a culture of open. And so that came in brilliantly to so that things in a way run smoothly, if you wish. We did some activities that were quite well received, like data expedition and looking at, for example, which data is missing, for whom is it missing, why is it missing, and what are the consequences then for policy making and for the livelihood of people that, of course, is going to be impacted by these policies. So their data that is invisible is quite good to look at. Why is this happening? So in a particular area, they looked at energy data, or they looked at things from the government. And well, it was eye-opening, I think, for them as well. And celebrating the Open Week in Tangasa University, they did 2 classes where they used open data for climate change, but then another lecture in the business school used open data for social innovation and how to critically look, for example, at absence of data and how that, as I said, just impacts the livelihood of people. And challenges that we faced there, I would say, basically look for funding for a project. So, sorry, the challenge is that it was little time, and if you wish, how can I say this? We draw from the will of people to contribute and collaborate with us because they were keen to learn more and really enhance their own teaching. But in a way, I think learning new things and ways of teaching is you have to invest time and effort. And sometimes we see that we need to allocate particular spaces of time and resources so that can happen in a way that is not, how do you say, instead of constraining them, it opens up a space of development, if you wish. And we had also at the University of Surrey with Carla Bonina, we worked with students. Here we didn't work with teachers because Carla is already an expert in open data or social innovation. So she took the materials that she found relevant, so we planned this together, and she embedded these materials in 3 weeks of an 8-week intensive course at the postgraduate level. And there was a workshop of the data ethics canvas from the Open Data Institute, which was quite eye-opening for people. And here I would say the highlight is the co-teaching of this particular chapter, which I find is a very good way to do professional development. Of course, someone needs to have some expertise, but it does really imply less commitment because we already know the area. And the impact on students is, of course, then direct. Embedding the content in the assessment was key for motivating students to work there. And the critical approach to data was of value for students. Many of them, we had a group of participants from India who were just saying, I can't believe this whole social and ethical dimension of data, how granular it is, how many details there are that we maybe didn't know about. And so I think that was something that allowed people to know something new and to say they were doing health app. So it really enhanced their application, because they need to create a solution that works with open data, if possible, to solve a social problem. And we also had something at the University of Open University of Catalonia. And this was a more non-formal learning approach because there was no possibility to do a formal accredited professional development. So it was very much an experimental approach where we present the content through workshops, again, with materials, so generative questions. Then the participants reflected upon this, had some time off, came back and thought about pedagogical designs that could use the content that they were exposed to. I think working with educators in pedagogical design is something that is very generative, I think, because it's like they see the immediate implication of a social problem that they can address through pedagogical design. And I think that is really interesting. We had invited speakers that was very, very interesting as well, their view, their own development through preparing these talks. And that was, I think, quite, for me at least, a highlight. And for them also, they said that because we interviewed them. So they said that was quite something they really felt the transformation. And challenges, again, participation is difficult when you don't have an accredited program. And the time, again, is a constraint. A month is not enough because the topic is big. So future plans is to address this, trying to design a longer and formal program at the postgraduate level. And then we had some invited participants from Peru, and although it was in Spain, but it was Spanish speaking, so Peru and Argentina came as well, and they were keen to bring this to their own universities, which is great. And well, I'm not going to stop here because I really would like to give time to the audience to ask questions, but it was eye-opening. I think this is the main takeaway. And Theo, if you would like to talk about why this matters, so that we can then show our tools and content, and then have some questions.
Yeah, so just I think a quick reflection really about why doing the project in the way that we've done was important and is successful in our view, is that we really drew on various different ideas and approaches from our kind of shared open education background. And so rather than just developing the OER as a kind of a standalone resource to be shared with people, or rather than developing an open course that was going to be sort of generic that anyone could join, we developed a series of resources which were then piloted in different contexts in collaboration, so that there were these kind of unique local versions of the experience, really, and it was in collaboration with kind of experts and people with the local knowledge of what was most interesting and meaningful for the participants in situ, and I think this is really quite special, and I haven't seen a lot of similar work done, so this is something we're really proud of.
So we did some tools for people to work with. We create workshops that people can download and use for themselves. We created learning design materials like templates, assessment sheets, pedagogical design kind of templates, podcasts and talks that are on the site that you can always hear, and the workshops that Javiera mentioned that were done in Uruguay, they are all available so people can hear them and take notes or use them as a resource for their own teaching. And then a data ethical framework. So this is kind of the main site, is a WordPress site, and we have different tabs where we have the modules that here we are. So in the modules you can see, so if, for example, we touch on this one, there is the module, here are the lessons on the right-hand side, this is the introduction, here is the module to be downloaded, here are the learning outcomes, the initial kind of media that we suggest to begin with. We have a glossary term that is linked to the sources, recommended readings, and then we have key complementary resources, and you can go then to each of these units if you wish. And this is, as you can see, all the rest of the modules are here, and there is also the Spanish modules are also here. The resources and publications are available here as well. So here what we have listed is the publications of the modules as PDFs, the presentation that someone can use if they want. We did a talk in Open Education Global Conference, there it is. There are the workshops in Spanish, some in English, and templates to do work if you want to at the pedagogical level. And in the interactive tools, we have come up with different tools, one of which is this, what we call thinking tool, where people, for example, have a problem, like in Uruguay or like in Kenya, they analyze a problem, but they then think about, okay, is this a problem that entails closed data or maybe closed and open data, because it's a continuum and nothing is necessarily always closed or always open. And then they place that in a space that they define by themselves. So they think about this problem, what does this entail? And the y-axis is created by the problem that they are facing or resolving, if you wish. And then once they have written here, whatever they say, this is then the starting point to do the deeper work of how can we solve this problem and what data and critical ethical analysis of data do we need. We have, for example, the data ethics canvas in a Jamboard where people can use this. This one is in English and there is another one in Spanish. And here people can use this canvas in their own teaching. And sorry, my internet is a bit slow, but if hopefully it will, yeah, here it is. And this is just the questions, ethical questions that you can ask the data and the problem you're solving, so that you have a broader and critical scope on how are you handling data. That is mainly this is from the Open Data Institute, which is a very reputed institution. And we had Flor Serales in two of our pilot studies, giving her workshop, which was great. People really valued that. And then we have many. You can see them here, and you can explore them if you wish. And another thing we have as a tool as well, and I hope it will load. Just a sec. Let's see. There it is. Sorry, my internet is quite short. How do you say that? So this one, Javiera will talk about this. This is an ethical framework to work with data and research projects in general. So Javi, I leave you here.
Yeah, thanks, Carol. Yeah, this basically it's a kind of a framework that mostly me and my colleague Christian Timmerman, who's a philosopher, came with, because it's, in a way, takes elements from bioethics and data ethics from one side, and from the other side from information architecture. So one of the things that we notice when we're doing research as part of this project and other things that we do is we notice that in general terms, because we reviewed around 250, it felt like 2,000, 2 million, 250 curriculum from research methods. We found out, and that's something that I noticed, that data, and it's kind of taught around consent, and that's it. So I kind of in research method, they teach you to get informed consent, but nothing else is taught beyond consent. So how are you going to manage the data? How are you going to store the data? How are you going to tell stories around that data? What are the ethical implications of analyzing, using, portraying data if you haven't been taught about the impact that the way that you communicate data can have in the community that you're studying? So this is a way, this framework, we designed it thinking about how we can help academics work with students, that when they work with data, they can look data beyond informed consent, and we can look into how students and how themselves, how ourselves want to work with data around challenging the power structures in the society, for example. How we're going to challenge the discourse. So who owns the power, who has the decision-making power in their hands, how we respect the autonomy of the communities, how do we respect the privacy of the groups that we're studying, how we promote fairness, how we communicate the data storytelling, including elements of addressing biases, doing no harm, and addressing equality. So this is kind of how we came with this sort of flower that deploys in how to do ethics as a method in research, rather than having research methods with a small component of data ethics. So that's our perspective on this.
And I just wanted to quickly add that I think, we so often hear in the context of this, the kind of wider social discourse around datafication, that we need people that are more trained in ethics, working in technology companies and developing the algorithms that rule us, and all this kind of thing. But through this aspect of the research that hopefully will be in a forthcoming publication soon, we've also looked at a lot of the ethical frameworks that are out there, and some of them tend to be quite superficial. So we really need to think beyond, ethics as a tick box exercise, and into what does that really mean to make ethics a method.
And in a way also, I think it's important to stress that this flower, if you wish, it has grown in a soil of ethical care, data feminism, and critical pedagogy, because the work, let's say, Javiera and Christian had their expertise in, so the philosopher and Javi is in her work of open data, and her work as someone that manages data. But then how do you teach this? How do you transform this in an actionable resource that then is able to be used and change the practices? So the critical pedagogy comes in how can this then be translated into a pedagogical instrument, if you wish, or dispositif, or framework, you name it. And so I think that's really, it benefited from the gaze of all of us that are looking at different aspects and dimensions of social reality, if you wish.